everyone, welcome to another YouTube painting process video. This time around I'll be showing you the process for my Venator piece from Deadlock, and as usual I'll be going over a topic to discuss about. Given that I've talked a lot of wee-woo stuff in the previous weeks, this time around I'll be going over a more technical aspect of painting, something that I believe that everybody who is learning how to paint should consider. Now, I fast forward my time lapses on these paintings for obvious reasons, but if you take note of what I'm doing, a lot of times you'll see me just placing stuff randomly and adjusting it as I go along. In fact, I generally don't like to sit and think, especially when it comes to stuff that's low stakes like personal fan art. This is something that I actively try to work on, and it's the idea of painting something and justifying it later. Now, everybody has their own ways of working and painting, rather. You're going to see some artists who like to plan everything out before they get into the painting part. And if it works for them, that's great. And I've said before, this is especially true when it comes to traditional media, where your actual paint costs a lot of money. So you do want to be more careful and plan out your moves when it comes to traditional media. But I tend to like to do the opposite of that, especially when it comes to digital paintings. Now, this is something that is sort of a technique in alla prima, if you're familiar with that, which is basically going outdoors and painting what you see rather quickly, sort of like the speed painting of traditional media. The reality is that when you're in those types of environments, you need to place things down quickly because things can shift. The time of day can go on and on. You don't have the luxury of always painting slowly and planning things. So when in alla prima, you're taught to use thick paint and placing it on the canvas immediately. Now, of course, when we're dealing with fan art or whatever, like fictional stuff, you're not going to have the luxury of referencing what's in front of you. However, you can take that alla prima mindset into your work. I'll give you the most prominent example of what I do when it comes to my own pipeline of working my paintings. If I'm feeling that I need a certain color or a certain value on the canvas to balance the composition, I'm going to generally just place it there, even if temporarily. Of course, with digital painting, you can always undo it, place on a second layer and that sort of thing. But regardless if you're doing traditional media or not, the mentality is the same. You don't want to overthink how you can justify the value or color that you place down. You can always find creative ways of doing it. But you always want to choose on the side of making a better artwork at the end. So if you feel like there's something that needs to be there, place it down first and make something out of it later. Generally speaking, if you are dealing with something that is more malleable, like personal OCs, original characters, you can always justify whatever you need to. Now, I'm gonna say some styles are gonna be stricter than others for that. So for instance, if you're really strict on and solidified your character designs, then perhaps you can't really adjust that too much. But if you have a style like mine, the one major benefit to what I do where I'm placing a lot of these randomly abstract colors is that I can sort of incorporate those designs into my work without needing a literal justification for everything I put down. This is something that I learned from looking at the master painter Gustav Klimt. His work is a major inspiration of mine, where he's incorporating these decorative designs into his more figurative work. And it's brilliant, and it's something that I like to take because, again, there's going to be a lot of cases where you're going to need certain colors and patterns that you might not be able to just justify perfectly if you were to be too realistic. Now, this mentality does have its limits, of course, so, like, yes, you can say, oh, I need a big, gigantic mechanical robot in this side of the composition, but if your scene doesn't really justify the existence of such a thing, then you'll probably have to be more creative in figuring out another way to get that sort of colors and values into where you need it to be. This is primarily the limitations of, let's say, portraiture as well, because obviously when you're dealing with characters and humanoid characters rather, you're going to adhere to anatomy, and there's only so many ways you can bend the body and have them wear clothes in a certain way before you can't really justify colors and values in weird places further. Now again, if you have a style like mine or like Gustav Klimt, then you can always figure out a way to justify what you need. But you don't always have that luxury, especially if you're dealing with more established IPs at the studio. Nonetheless, if you need a good reason to do this sort of thing, look no further than how environment artists paint. Now, I started my career doing environments, but there's going to be way better environment artists that you can probably talk to. But if you've ever seen professional ones work, a lot of times they're going to have this very free-flowing painterly style, sort of like alla prima, like I said before. But the reason why is because environments generally have a lot more justification in where things are placed. If you think about it, if you're painting like a cityscape, you can always place a sign with a certain color wherever you need. If you're painting rocks and mountains, of course, the idea of concept art rocks, you can always adjust and morph the rock shapes to whatever you really need for a composition. So I find this sort of mentality is actually better for environment paintings than doing, let's say, a rigid character design. But it's still applicable to any subject matter you're dealing with. Ultimately, it's rather important to get all the colors and values that you need on a canvas and mold it into the composition, rather than doing what I've said not to do in previous videos, where you're sitting around, you're analyzing, you're overthinking, you're doing this analysis paralysis type of thing. That's why if you have the intuition and the instinct to place something on the canvas, you should just do it, especially when it comes to digital painting. And then afterwards, you can, as you're molding it around, you're moving around the paint, that's when you can start making it more representational so that it makes sense in the scene, the composition that you're dealing with. All in all, this sort of mentality is really the justification for how I do things. I am sort of a vibe painter in a way. I like to just do things and place things down and go with the flow and momentum of my mind rather than overthinking and planning things. Again, there's no correct way of doing things. Whatever you think works for you is going to work for you. So every artist has different methods of their madness. So take this as a suggestion and not a principle or law. Anyways, thank you for watching. This is the final piece of Venator from Deadlock. As usual, like this video, subscribe to my channel. Any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.